Good evening and welcome to the RTM Joint Committee presentations on January 22nd. Will you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on our agenda is to hear a report from the First Selectman or his designee on the leases of town properties, and I think the town attorney is here to give that report.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm sure you all have a copy of the list of all the leases, so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there any questions for the town attorney? No questions? Seeing none?
Thank you very much.
It was easy.
Good evening.
Next, we have a report from the First Selectman or his designee on Chapter 61-1 of the Town Code of the Town of Fairfield, recovery of costs related to properties with chronic breaches of the peace, public disturbances, and disorderly conduct. Good evening, Chief Liddy, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So I'm assuming everybody looked at the backup. We didn't know whether you were interested in this fiscal year results or if you were looking back into last fiscal year. In last fiscal year, we issued approximately 18 warnings with only one collection of $87.67. In this current fiscal year, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with no collections yet as of January 1st, but you'll note at the bottom we did collect $1,931 from the Sky Hookah Lounge related to this statute.
Okay. Are there any questions for the chief on the report under this statute? Representative Durrell.
Yes, Alex Durrell, RTM3. Congratulations. It was a nice speech Thursday.
Thank you.
Always good to include your mom, as I find out. Anyways, actually today, twice at 4 o'clock, all my smoke alarms went off. I called the fire, they came, they thought they had fixed it, and then at 7 o'clock, they run off again. Would I be charged for that?
No, not under this statute,
Okay.
61. No, this is related strictly to breach of peace, disorderly conducts.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good.
Any other questions? Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. Chief Liddy, could you, for the 2 years, you mentioned 2 different years, were there any repeat calls to locations?
In the prior fiscal year, they were all unique except for one. 989 Fairfield Beach Road had 3 responses, and that's the one where we did collect $87.
Okay, thank you very much.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Next, we have a report from the Blight Officer concerning condemnation and blight.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Tom Conley, Blight Prevention Officer. How's that? I don't want to block my mother's vision in case she's watching, and she will be watching. So I hope everybody got their report. There was one small typo. If you notice, number 15 is actually 185 Thorpe Street. That's the Fairfield Lumber site where we had burnout there and the neighbors were complaining. So we've cleaned all of that up and hopefully we'll be collecting some fairly good fees from them. So, do we have any questions on that?
Any questions on the blight report? Representative Vergara.
Hi, Jill Vergara, District 7. Do you know how many of these blighted properties are businesses versus residential?
Most of them are residential, believe it or not, at this point. I think the largest of those, the commercial, actually there's two commercial. Bronson Road, the old gas station, that's still blighted. We're accumulating fees up there now. And then the Thorpe Street, the Fairfield Lumber site. But they have cleaned up. They have not paid their fees yet.
Did the Stratfield Market ever make it onto this list?
Not this list, but the year before they were on, they have done some cleanup. There's a new owner now, so we're hoping there'll be some new building permits soon.
And has Fairfield Theater ever made it onto this list?
We were requested, it has not. We were requested to look at it, so we went several times with the fire chief and fire marshals. We found nothing that would actually meet the blight intent.
But the blight ordinance maybe can be broadened. There are some other towns that have broader definitions of blight, as I understand it.
I've researched several of them. You certainly could change the blight ordinance. Actually, we are looking to do some changes to it, so we've approached the town attorney and some of the local RTM members to help us draft a new, quicker, more efficient blight ordinance. So,
thank you.
sure.
Further questions? Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Pistilli, District 3. Hi, how are you? I know you might not be able to answer this question exactly, but if you had to give like a distribution or a characterization on this list of how long these properties have been on the list, like what the longest is, and like how long it usually takes to remedy situations, because just these things seem to take a long time, so I'm just curious to know the time frame to resolution.
Sure. Well, if you look at number 1, it's 1180 Oldfield Road. I would say that's been on for, I'm embarrassed to say, 2.5 years. But we're quite lenient where there's small blight, although it is blight. We're lenient in some locations where, let's say, older people have difficulties maybe understanding and remediating that blight. So I would say we kind of drag it on a little bit so we don't impose so much of we don't want to impose a fine on somebody that can't really pay for it. We do clean it up, and so we extend it to them. So 2.5 years, it's a long time.
Yes.
And so in those cases, is there introduction of like social services, so like Habitat for Humanity type organizations, and they come in and help out with those situations, or how is that usually remedied?
Yeah, well, this was a very unique, if we're discussing that one, it's very unique in that the homeowner did not want anyone on the property. So, again, an older gentleman in his late 80s who did not want somebody on the property that was touching his valued possessions. So we do offer social services. Some of the church groups, some of the synagogues offer a lot of young help. It's when people say no to that becomes prolonged and difficult to deal with that type of person. So.
Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 3. I actually met with Mr. Connolly and with Mr. Cleary and the town attorney regarding the blight ordinance, and we've been talking about this for quite some time now. As a matter of fact, there's a list that has been passed over to the town attorney, who I believe will be working on trying to make some of the changes so that we can meet better the needs of the town and to help the residents so that they're not getting those that really need the help and who cannot afford these the kind of fines that are happening, but also to make the process quicker and not be delayed so long so we don't have 2 years and 3 years going on. So I just wanted to share that with the body. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Representative Iacono.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Thanks for being here this evening. What's the fines that you have on the list? Are there any that have grown substantially high, or any properties that have significant fines?
Yes, I would say Thorpe Street, 185 Thorpe Street is about $58,000. Bronson Road, which is the old gas station, is still accumulating $100 a day. Last, and I'm going to say that was early January, they're about $12,000. So we have a couple of other sites that are accumulating $100 a day.
And what are the next step remedies for people that have fines that are going that high?
We would lien their properties. So we'll put a lien, we'll discuss it with the town attorney, we'll lien their properties, and when they decide to sell or exchange that property, we will collect those. We'll be first on the list to collect those fines.
Great. Mr. Conley, you said you work really hard with people that maybe don't necessarily have the means to clean up their property. Just for the record, how does it work when we collect our fines? Those go back to the general fund, correct?
Yes, the general fund, correct.
So you don't have a budget line item at all for any type of cleanup or assistance or helping anyone?
Correct.
Have you tried to get money in the past, to ask the first selectman to add it to your budget? Or I know the RTM has fallen through trying to get ordinance changes. Is it, are there things that you would like to do for your department to have a line item to have these things taken care of?
Well, it certainly would help if we had a line item. We are paying some attorney's fees, some engineers, some cleanup people, and we don't have a line item. So it would certainly be helpful if we did, if we had an accounting line. We have approached the RTM in the past, we've discussed, but never really with the first selectman before. So it certainly would help. We do mail out, we do have expenses that are absorbed between the health department and the building department. So it'd be nice to have a couple of $1,000, some kind of a rotating fund or a fund, just so we can utilize that money.
Thank you. For those members of the board, I am interested in finally making this happen for the Blight Committee, and I'm volunteering to sit and work on the ordinance so that there is a funding mechanism. If anybody's interested in co-sponsoring that with me, I'd be very interested in doing so. But I plan on setting up a meeting with Mr. Conley to figure out how it can finally happen. And this is my third term now on the RTM. I've heard repeatedly that we were going to do something for this, and we have yet to do it. So if anybody wants to join me in that, you're more than welcome. And Mr. Conley, I look forward to working with you on that.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. Oh, sorry. Representative Lefkowitz.
Hi, Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. There's a property that I know, for instance, is there a reason a property wouldn't be on this list if I know it's been in discussions specifically on North Banks. Is there a reason it would not have made this list this year?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was actually if we got the complaint. So we get complaints via walk-ins, a phone, or QSend, which is the town online program. So we would respond to a phone call. We might drive out, take a look at it, make a quick determination. So I'm not familiar with that property.
I can ask you offline because it has been discussed. I know lawyers were contacted because you're having trouble reaching the owner.
Please, I'd like to know about that because I'm not aware of that property. We have had in the past on North Cedar.
North Banks. Or Banks North. I can't.
Oh, Banks North.
Banks North.
I'm sorry.
Banks North.
So we have, yeah, so did you want a response or?
I was just curious if there was a reason why a specific property wouldn't have made this list, knowing that it's kind of in a process already.
So we contacted the contractor on that job, and he has made, we've made recommendations to him as to how to clean the site up, and he has done that. So I'm not sure that it's still blighted.
Okay.
Or that it even met the blight. So everybody has to understand too that vegetation, grass that's growing is not blightable. So there's a lot of that going on. We respond to a lot of calls about vegetation. My neighbor's property is overgrown and I can't see the stop sign. So we'll pass those things on to Public Works or the Highway Department, but it's really about what the blight ordinance defines as blight. So.
Thank you.
But I can look into that, and I will.
Yeah, thank you.
Pretty sure I know the property. Yeah. Sure.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, thanks for your report.
Thank you.
Next, we have the WPCA pump station design upgrade. Good evening.
Good evening. Joseph Michelangelo, Director of Public Works. The request is a capital appropriation of $199,730 for the design of a sanitary sewer pump station on the Easton Turnpike. This is totally funded by WPCA, but as a matter of policy, it still must go through the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the RTM because it is town money. Sanitary sewer pump station is located right on the old GE property, now the West Campus of Sacred Heart University, about 40 feet away from where the Christmas tree is located there. And it serves the whole area there, both the old and new SHU campus, and probably around 300 residential properties, Cambridge Health, Associated Facilities, Notre Dame High School, in that area there. It's outlived its service life, approximately 50 years old, and it's under capacity. So this was something that we had planned for replacement. As part of the new application for the Sacred Heart improvements on the old GE property, we went through a rigorous planning process with them to get the full build out and estimated future flows, in addition to the other properties in this area. As you can see in the write-up, GE is funding a significant portion of this. They've committed $1 million to the total $1.8 million. So we think it's a good project that needs to be done. And like I said, it's fully funded by the WPCA fund balance, which comes from the user fees.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from our members? Representative Lefkowitz.
Mr. Moderator, may I make an unrelated comment, but related to Public Works?
Well, you shouldn't if you prefaced it that it's unrelated, but
It's
if it's
related
quick, I'll
only
allow
in the
it.
sense of the job well done that your department has done, because they responded to a constituent in District 1 who was very grateful, and they came very quickly, so I just wanted to say thank you publicly.
Appreciate it, Nancy.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the proposed amendments to the alarm ordinance. We're going to take this before the golf course. Yes. Good evening, Deputy Chief Smith, and congratulations to you as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think we've been through this several times. The police department's not requesting any changes to the ordinance that's on the table, so I guess I would just open up any questions at this point.
Are there any questions from our members? Representative Gerber?
Yeah, hi, Bill Gerber, District 2. Annual registration requirement, I just realized reading through this again that it doesn't say anything about how people are going to be notified. So are they going to be reminded?
Yeah, we're currently working on the program to make that happen. So yes, we will have a program in place when we start registration to make sure that you get an annual reminder, whether it be email or by mail. Okay. Okay, thanks. I mean, should that be in here, or?
So I think the sentiment of the co-sponsors was that should be left to the discretion of the department, how they implement it and notify people, rather than restrict it.
But the fact that they will be notified maybe should be added here. Not how they'll be notified, but, no, okay, well.
I mean,
reading this, what could happen is no one notifies people, and then we collect $100 from everyone because no one will remember on their own. But
Yeah, that's not part of our plan.
no, of course not. I'm just wondering whether some very vague language on an annual notification will be provided to. But
Yeah, from our standpoint, that will be part of our internal process on how we handle registration. But, it wasn't proposed as part of the actual
yeah, and I didn't propose it, and I looked at it, but we could add that. I'll think about it.
Any other questions or comments from our members? I do have a question. So there was a comment raised at the meeting last month about a potential amendment that someone might propose with respect to either nonprofits or educational facilities or maybe some other entities that would be, under the amendment, exempt from the penalties associated with false alarms. Did you give that amendment any consideration at this time?
Yeah, at this time, from our standpoint, we wouldn't recommend starting to carve out exceptions. it becomes very difficult from our end then to determine who's a nonprofit. How does that determine? I did look at last year, houses of worship. There was only one out of the whole year that ended up getting one fine. So it's not as if we're fining those types of businesses. And again, not-for-profits would be very difficult to carve that out. Public schools are exempt just because, again, you'd be moving from one town account to another, so it didn't make a lot of sense to do that. Private entities would still be under the ordinance.
Okay, thank you for looking into that. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have the proposed bond for the H. Smith Richardson Clubhouse Building Project.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. Craig Curley, Chairman of the H. Smith Richardson Building Committee. With me today is Hal Schwartz, who's the Vice Chair. We also have with us today the architect, to the extent that questions come up. And some questions may come up related to DPW, and fortunately, Joe Michelangelo is here as well. So we delivered a fairly healthy packet to you in advance of this meeting, but it's not our intention to take you through that page by page. I think this is could be a fairly quick discussion. We've been in front of this body multiple times throughout the year. But really, what I'd like to do is take you through what I think is really 3 points. And the first is to just walk this body through where we were last and where we are now. When we came in front of this body the last time, we were estimating the project cost to be $7.6 million. The bond resolution in front of you is 7.02. So I'd like to walk you through that. There were also a couple of things that came out of the Board of Finance meeting when we met with them in November, so we wanted to share that work with this body as well. So just in terms of the walk, as I mentioned, the Board of Finance, at the Board of Finance presentation in November, we were at $7.6 million. At that time, they asked us to perform a couple of analyses, one related to solar and energy and electricity production via solar panels, and the other is a pro forma analysis, and we can get into that in a little bit. When we met with the Board of Selectmen in December, early December, they had challenged this committee to reduce our costs further, below 7.6. When we met with this body in mid-December, this body challenged the building committee to lower our costs below the 7.6. The building committee did meet in late December, and we reduced the cost by an additional $300,000. And we can walk you through that tonight so you can understand exactly what changes we made. But that got us from 7.6 to 7.3. When we met with the Board of Selectmen and asked for their approval of this bonding resolution, an amendment was made and passed to reduce the project cost by $280,000. That wasn't going to be a reduction in actual expense for the project. It was just going to transfer $280,000 away from the bonding and put it into operating expense. Specifically, the $280,000 was to cover the cost of the parking lot. And more specifically, we were going to look to the town DPW department to manage that process, and they would pay for that $280,000 out of their operating budget. That was not a request of the building committee. It was an amendment that was made by one of the Board of Selectmen and passed, and ultimately the Board of Selectmen passed that amendment, so approved the bond resolution unanimously 3-0 for 7.02 million. And then when we met with the Board of Finance on January 8th, we went through the analyses, the solar and the pro forma work that we shared with you as well. And fortunately, we received the approval of the Board of Finance with an 8-1 vote. So generally speaking, I think everyone, including this body, has expressed their appreciation for the work that our committee has done. I want to thank my committee as well for all the work that they've done. We've worked really hard to put something together which I think is, which will be a really good asset for the town. The one point that I want to make before we turn it over to the questions is there still is a lot of discussion or concern about a $7 million project for a clubhouse. There's a lot of people mention from time to time about why can't we build a building for less. I want to make sure everyone understands that this is a bigger project than just a building. If you turn to page 4 of your packet, there's a breakdown of the 7.02. And round numbers, it's $4.5 million for the building itself. And I want to make sure that that's not lost on anybody, in that there are other things in this project. There's a $500,000 worth of site work that is just part of the whole campus that needs to be revamped. The cart barn's another $360,000. There's going to be $1 million of professional services. And of course, because we're coming for bonding, funding approval in advance of going out for bids, we've got $500,000 of contingency. If everything goes to plan, we actually hopefully will be under budget. We certainly have every intention of managing this down and staying at or under budget. But bottom line is that it's not a $7 million building. It's a $4.5 million building. So with that, we can take you through the value engineering in more detail. Hal can take you through that. I can take you through the solar analysis that we did for the Board of Finance. I can take you through the pro forma work that they asked us to prepare as well. But with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Questions from our members? Representative Walk.
Representative Walk, District 5. I don't want to say that I'm against this project at all. I'm for it. I'm not even, as far as how much money it's costing to do it, that's not an issue. My question is, I remember going back when we were discussing the building being put up near the driving range. One of the reasons why we didn't do it maybe was maybe this would be more money to do than the building we're doing now. And then one of the things I remember that the fire department didn't give a blessing because it would be hard for the trucks to get up the hill. So somebody I know who plays at Smith Richardson loves the course and loves the place, and we were talking about this, and he said when I brought up that reason, because he brought up the reason to me, they should put the building up by the driving course. And I'm saying, well, we were thinking about that, but you can't. He said there's another way, and he showed me on the map for the fire department to get to the building if it was put up on the hill where it would be flat to get up. Now, I didn't drive where this is to see, to go up to see if this would work. So I just wanted to throw it out. I mean, it was a good idea that the clubhouse would be up on top by the driving range, but is this something like it's just not feasible right now for the cost of?
Well, there was a couple of issues. There's no electric up there. There's no sewage up there. There's nothing up there. To start with. So the project would be $3 million just to get all the main supply up there. The parking lot would be across the street. There's only 2 ways up there, and both of them are on Hoydens Lane. You have Hoydens Hill to Hoydens Lane, the roads are too narrow. They would have to be widened on both sides.
You mean coming
from either Hoydens Hill or Hoydens Lane or from Morehouse Highway. The roads would have to be widened. And the police department and the fire department, when we had spoken with them at the very beginning, weren't sure. We never did the actual study, but their recommendation would be that the roads would have to be widened. With the parking lot being across the street and the carts coming back and forth, it would have put in. They were recommending large speed bumps up there and.
Yeah, I saw the map that it would have to be the trees would have to be taken out and it would have to be cleared out.
When we looked at it originally, we were thinking probably $3 or $4 million more than where we were, and that's when we were back at 6.1 or 6.2. So basically, when we looked at the additional cost that it would be, the committee decided not to go that route. Plus, we all know the neighborhood would have objected, I think, a little bit. And then we don't know what those lawsuits and court costs could have been additional, how long the project could have been delayed. But for the committee, it was basically, about $3.5 or $4 million additional money to put it in. It just didn't offset the additional revenue that would have been generated at the driving range, didn't warrant the additional funds, which is, 1.5 times where we are now. So that's why. We really wanted to go up there because it would have been beautiful, but it wasn't the right time.
Thank you.
Representative Bertram?
Hi, Carrie Bertram, District 8. Unlike Representative Volk, I do have trouble with this project. I think people know that. What I'm having trouble with is understanding why the people of Fairfield are being asked to subsidize what I believe to be essentially a semi-private club under the premise of being a public club. And looking at the assumptions on page 17 of the information, I'd like to ask you about the current fees, or current green fees, both during the week and on the weekends. Do you have that information? Because I do.
Yeah, it's in your packet.
It's in the back, and so it's
So,
$26 Monday through Thursday, $18 if you're a season's pass holder, and then $31 Friday through Sunday, $18 if you're a season's pass holder.
again, the information's in your packet. That sounds
So
right.
I think that's right. So how many seasons, are seasons pass holders capped?
That's a question that should be directed to the Golf Commission, but I believe the answer is no.
Okay. And then do you know, because the Golf Commission I don't think is here, if seasons pass holders are limited in the number of rounds that they play?
No.
Right. So in terms of the assumptions that are included, page 17, the rates, I guess I can appreciate why in 19 and 20 when building would happen, no increase. Can you give us any color as to the proposed $2 increase or $1 increase for years 2021, 2022?
I can. We worked collaboratively with the Golf Commission and certainly spent some time with them. What we talked about with the Golf Commission is two things. One, putting in place a 7-year rate plan, and two, putting together a marketing plan that would help attract golf events to come once the clubhouse was completed. In terms of the rate schedule, generally speaking, it's not a given, but generally speaking, rates go up roughly $1 every other year. Sometimes it goes up for adults, but not seniors, maybe not juniors. Maybe it'll go up for non-residents, but not residents. The Golf Commission goes through a detailed rate study every single year. They conducted that study, I believe, at our last meeting. We presented provided a schedule that showed those rates and how they compared to, I think it's 8 or 10 courses in the area. When they do that comparative analysis, they can see whether they have room to raise their rates or not relative to the competition. They're very much tied to making sure that they don't outprice the rates versus the competing courses, because at some point, people will vote with their feet, not necessarily come if it's too expensive. So what we talked about with the Golf Commission was during the year of construction, it made sense to hold rates flat, and that was not really a controversial idea. But to make sure that we get back on track, or the town gets back on track when the construction was complete, to raise rates by $2, and then try and resume a more steady schedule of rate increases thereafter.
So maybe this is more of a statement than a question. Without a competitive club, perhaps maybe that made sense. But when I just did my own Google search, that was not, I don't believe that was provided in information. Orange Hill, $34 for walking during the week, $44 on the weekends. I'm not sure how it compares when our club would be ostensibly state-of-the-art-ish. I understand that some cuts have been made, but it is definitely a project that we are proposing, or that you are proposing, that we invest a significant amount of money. So I don't understand the lack of skin in the game, so to speak, from the golfers, that will be participating in this, and that's a significant issue from my perspective.
Well, understand that the building committee has no voice over what the rates are. We've worked with the Golf Commission to recommend that they consider raising rates. They've discussed it at length and thought that a $2 rate increase was appropriate. That's what we built into the pro forma models that were shared today. But to the extent that this body feels that they should ask the Golf Commission to be more aggressive with their rate structure, they certainly can do that.
Just one last question, sorry. On the pro formas for the tournament activity, given the fact that we're at max capacity already, can you provide any color as to the prospective 3 tournaments to 20 tournaments in 2017 and how that would come to fruition?
Yeah. Clearly, from the beginning, the intention of looking at a replacement for the clubhouse was to do it in a way that would allow the town to generate incremental revenue. That incremental revenue would help subsidize the cost of the project. One of the main sources of incremental revenue that the committee looked at was to build the clubhouse to a size that would allow it to attract those outings or charity events. Right now, the building is too small. It's decrepit, but it's also too small. So we sized the building not to host a 350-person wedding, but to host a 120 to 150-person outing. So we feel the building is right-sized for that activity. And then when we look at the actual number of tournaments that are being held at other courses, Sterling Farms in Stamford, for example, does between 25 and 30 tournaments a year. Ailing Memorial in New Haven does over 30 a year. It's not unheard of for courses to do 15, 20, 25 tournaments a year. So because the Golf Commission does not have a plan in place or historical performance of attracting these outings, we thought it would be prudent to assume a slow ramp-up of the tournament schedule. So that's why we started with 3, and then added a handful a year thereafter, and not until 2027 would we actually get to 20. Clearly, if there's an active effort to try and attract these events, like Fairfield Realtors Association or Fairfield Rotary Club, there are lots of Fairfield organizations that are going out of Fairfield right now.
And yet, with no limit on seasons passes and no limits on how many games you play, you can't
That's
necessarily
an issue for
guarantee.
the Golf Commission.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Further questions or comments?
David Fogel.
Representative Fogel, I'm sorry.
I'm new. And as a new member, I want to thank both of you and everyone involved for your hard work on this project. So I want to focus on the financial aspect for a moment. And actually, in response to my colleague's question that was just asked, just to clarify, you said the increased revenue in the pro formas would help subsidize the project. But my reading of the pro formas is that actually the financials, the revenue, would cover the debt service under your assumptions, correct? And I think that's an important point, unless I'm misunderstanding.
No, that's an excellent point, and I thank you for pointing us in that direction. If you turn to page 19 of your packets, what I've combined together here is the last 19 years of financial results, so both expressed in terms of number of rounds played and surpluses that the golf operations have generated for the town's benefit. What we've done after the 2018-19 year is we've, at the Board of Finance's request, created 2 pro formas. One, what does it look like if this building is approved or this project is approved? Clearly, there's going to be roughly $470,000 of debt service associated with this bond. And do the golf operations continue to pay for itself in terms of making sure that there is no drain on the taxpayer? The alternative is, what if we do nothing? And you can see on page 19 to the right, through the fiscal year 2018-2019, the golf operations over the last 19 years has generated a little more than $4.1 million surplus for the town's benefit. If we do nothing, based on the assumptions that are used in this pro forma, 10 years forward, we will still be at a $4.1 million surplus, which basically means over the next 10 years, if we do nothing, there's no additional incremental benefit that this golf operations provides to the town. And if you look more closely, you'll see that there are 4 or 5 years of surpluses, 4 or 5 years of deficits. Conversely, based on the assumptions that were used in the pro forma, if the building is approved, the projection is that the surplus will increase by an additional $850,000 over the next 10 years to be a total of $5 million contributed. Now, we could certainly discuss what assumptions went into these pro formas, but I think it's important, and I'd welcome the chance to go through it in detail, but I think it's important to understand that this was also discussed at length with the Board of Finance, and they were very comfortable. And an 8-1 vote actually is a pretty good testimony to the fact that we will be fiscally irresponsible if we don't move forward with this project.
If I may continue briefly, I don't want to go through in detail the assumptions, but I do want to talk high level about them. Because for me, just given our state's economic crisis and the effect on the town, this is the most important issue to me, and I get more comfortable with the project to the extent that I'm comfortable that the revenues are likely to offset the debt service associated with it. So without getting into the detail of the assumptions, I mean, in the private sector, when you see things like this, generally you come up with a base case scenario and then an upside scenario where things go even better than expected, but then a downside scenario. And I'm just curious if you could high level describe your assumptions and your comfort with them and how you would characterize them in that context.
Yeah, that's a very fair question. Thank you. I didn't prepare pro formas beyond the 2 that were presented. However, at our previous meetings, we did present an expected case, an aggressive case, and an optimistic case and a pessimistic case. In all of those scenarios, we're showing incremental revenue that is being generated by this asset, primarily because with the more square footage in a new facility, it's expected that the rent received from the concessionaire should go up. It's got to go out for an RFP, and it's subject to a bid process, but there's every expectation that the rent that the town collects will go up. It's expected that this will be a more cost-effective, lower maintenance, energy efficient building. That's going to save the town money too. Right now, DPW is going up there regularly and repairing the furnace and repairing the plumbing and repairing something. Not to mention the fact that the building itself is on the verge of failure in many of the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing components. In addition, we touched on it a little bit, there is a forecast that we will generate additional revenue from these events. And we were fairly conservative in how that ramped up. But if we don't do something with the building, we will not have any of the incremental revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Representative Lopez.
Hi, Erin Lopez, District 2. I'm so glad you brought up DPW. I have a few questions about DPW, so maybe if I don't know who's appropriate to answer. I'm nervous about removing so much money from this bonding project and putting it directly into the budget of the DPW, who, as we know, has suffered from budget cuts a lot recently. So I guess I'm looking for some consolation that this isn't something that is going to go into a budget and then be messed with, what fiscal year this is going to hit, that type of thing.
Well, and I will invite Joe Michelangelo to come up and speak, but I will confirm that when the Board of Selectmen made their amendment, or before they voted on the amendment, when they made the motion to amend to take the $280,000 out of the project, Mr. Michelangelo did mention that his expectation would be that if he would increase his paving budget request by $280,000 to cover this cost. Now, clearly, one of the concerns that I also expressed is that to the extent that budget is not approved, and it's subject to budget approval risk by all the bodies in this town. I would hate to have the clubhouse built and not have a parking lot to go along with it. I believe the Board of Selectmen's response to that was, well, one way or the other, the parking lot will get done, but it may mean that if the line item for Joe is lower, he's going to have to make some decisions, and that's an unfortunate situation to be in, for sure.
I feel like we're already in that decision every year. We're not paving the roads as per planned, even in a normal year. So I feel like this is going to cause a disruption to the regular budget. And I guess also, budgetary-wise, you are doing a lot of work up there on a regular basis. Do you have an idea of how much money you'll be saving going forward with the new building? Because obviously this winter you're taking care of it, and it's been frigid the last few days.
Yeah, for the paving, just, and Mr. Curley stated it very accurate, but the bottom line is no, there isn't a funding for the $280,000 set aside in the future budget. It remains to be determined in future budgets that are passed. As far as the maintenance item, yeah, it is an older building and there are maintenance items. There's some larger capital type items that we've been sort of deferring on. The cart barn has a bad roof on it, so eventually, if nothing's done, we'd have to take the shingles off, take the plywood off, re-plywood it, and re-shingle it. And we're still left with a sort of inefficient building. The building, operationally, it doesn't fit the carts. So the way it works now is, only a certain amount of carts get used all the time because the other ones are buried inside. So, eventually, I think there'd have to be an addition to that cart barn too. Mr. Curley mentioned the plumbing. The way the traps are set up in there, you get some back odors. So to solve that is not an insurmountable thing, but we'd have to cut into the concrete floor in a couple locations. So I think we've pegged that at somewhere around $50,000. And there's another item there that's fairly major.
The parking lot, one way or the other.
The parking lot. There's another structural item too, which I can't put my finger on right now, that we're constantly addressing. So.
Now, do you feel that in the year where construction is happening, where whatever fiscal year this hits, that some of the maintenance costs that you're putting out will help offset some of this paving costs? I mean, I can't imagine it's going to be more than $250,000, but is there something in there that will help balance a little bit?
And I'd say the nickel and dime stuff, it's hard to say that they'd add up to that much, but there are several $50,000 projects and $75,000, $100,000 projects that we would eventually have to do within the next 5-year time frame, which do make a dent in the total capital cost.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Representative Gerber.
Bill Gerber, District 2. Craig, first of all, thanks very much for all the time you've put in over the years on this. It seems like two of the major assumptions in your pro forma, just carrying on what Representative Vogel was talking about, but two of the major ones are the increase in fees, which over the course of your model is $8 over a 10-year period. So I think all the fees go up by $8 per round in your model. And the other is the increase in rounds, which is like a 4,000 round increase. And I would assume the rounds, you have influence over, we run a good shop, but the fees we absolutely have influence over. And to the extent that the golf committee hasn't signed up to this, that would concern me. Because the $8 times the 40-some, that's, I think it comes out to about $350,000. And so your bottom line on this is pretty razor thin. We went from having a couple $100,000 in some years of surplus. Now you're projecting sort of under $50,000. So if we were to lose some portion of that fee increase, and without a substantial increase in rounds, which I also would assume there's some cost associated with that as well, you're not going to break even. And the 4,000 increase in rounds, I think, is about 70,000, assuming that you get the $8 increase. So there is a good chance we're going to be losing money on this project, but but I think my main concern is, I know those things are, it's a projection, you're doing the best job you possibly can, but to the extent that the golf committee, in my opinion, the golf committee should be basically posting this and saying, this is what we're going to do over the next 10 years. And unless, obviously they have, it's not by law, but, this is what we expect to do. So that people, every year when you raise rates, people come out and protest, and we see it with the marina and everything else. But we're going to have to do this in order for this to work, financially.
Right. So thank you for that. There's a lot there, so let me try and address it, each piece of that. First off, I need to confirm that the Golf Commission has acted. They have passed a 7-year rate plan. It is non-binding because legally, each Golf Commission each year has to go through the rate approval process and vote each and every year for the subsequent year. But much like the Golf Commission did 10 years ago, they put in place a 10-year financial plan, and they followed it. So the intention of the 7-year rate plan is to create a roadmap so that as the Golf Commission turns over, people understand that there is a expectation and a plan in place to follow a certain rate schedule.
May I interrupt for 1 second? So what year does that 7-year plan take us through?
I believe they're on year 8 or 9 right now of the 10-year plan.
No, I'm sorry. What fiscal year would that rate plan take us through in this model? Do you know?
Well, I mean,
What year does it start? Do you know?
I believe they have it started after, this upcoming year.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So what they decided to do is they voted and acted on to raise rates by $1 this upcoming year because there's no construction that's going to start until after this season ends. And if this project moves forward and construction is primarily in 2020, there would be no rate increase in 2020. And then coming off of that construction, the rates would go up by $2, and then it would start to kind of follow an every other type increase schedule. It's a little bit more. It's not exactly every other, but it's laid out there.
On page 17, Bill.
Okay.
So the other thing I wanted to address is you talked about the assumptions on the rounds. The Golf Commission tries to optimize the number of rounds played to fall between 40 and 45,000 rounds. That's a long-standing goal that the Golf Commission tries to follow. If you look back at the history, they have not been fully utilizing the course. Some of that's driven by weather. But there's certainly a big hole when you compare the municipal golf operations of Fairfield versus other courses that are holding these events. There are, a couple thousand rounds per year that Fairfield is not getting, and Trumbull and other public courses are getting. So in the assumptions here, the expectation was not to increase rounds other than a slight increase once the building was complete, call it a novelty factor, and then hold them flat thereafter, only increasing rounds by this incremental event activity. What we, on the flip side of that, however, what we are assuming is if no action is taken by or to approve this building, resident rounds would stay flat, fairly captive audience, but non-residents would start to decline by roughly 2 or 2.5% per year. That's a guess. I can't say scientifically that 2% decrease year over year is reasonable, but that's a third of our play. So it's roughly a little less than 1% decrease. It seemed like a reasonable assumption to make.
Yeah, I mean, all the assumptions seem, possibly reasonable, but just the fact that, for every dollar, let's say you hit the 44,000 rounds, for every dollar that you're off of your fee increase, that's $44,000, right? on average. So, you know, to the extent that we can, we should be sort of making everyone aware that this is what's going to happen over the next 10 years. And, you know,
And they have. They've
and across the board, because it's not like just individual categories. You have every single category, including seniors, going up by $8 over the 10-year.
Right, and the rate plan that the Golf Commission talked about and moved forward on was a comprehensive plan.
Great. And, oh, one last question. And, the ice skating rink, is that off the table with the change in the paving?
Yeah, we do have some square footage where if you recall, we were looking at moving the cart barn behind the third green and being adjacent to the parking lot. For cost reasons, we abandoned that plan and just are renovating with an addition to the existing cart barn. That leaves that square footage available behind the third green adjacent to the parking lot. So what we talked about with the landscape architect is to make sure that during construction, that area is graded. It'll still be turf, but it will be an area that Parks and Rec can use, whether it's for a seasonal ice rink or a permanent structure like paddle tennis would be an option as well.
Mr. Curley, I just wanted to point out that we do have someone from the Golf Commission who's joined us. Ryan Scully is here, so to the extent you want to deflect any Golf Commission questions to Mr. Scully, I'm sure he'd be very gracious in taking them.
Yeah, could we have Mr. Scully sort of speak to that and just say that they're on board with raising the rates by $8 over 10 years across the board?
Hi, Ryan Scully. I'm the chairman of the Golf Commission, and I was surprised to hear that you thought that the Golf Commission wasn't on board with this project and hasn't been working hand in hand with the building committee, because we really have been. Mr. Curley's come in multiple times and given presentations regarding the clubhouse. I think everybody on the Golf Commission, at least the current Golf Commission, understands, you know, what the situation is, and like Craig said, we implemented a 7-year rate plan. Now, I probably won't even be on the commission when the building actually opens, and I'm not sure how many members of the commission will actually be on the commission, because the building's not opening until 2021. You know, that's why we can't just lock everybody in for, you know, like Craig said, it has to be done on a year-to-year basis. But, and in addition to that, we've taken Mr. Curley's pro forma that he prepared for all of you folks, and we've made that available to the Golf Commission, and we're going to make that part of, I guess, I don't know what to call it, the onboarding process for new commissioners, where we're going to provide that to them so everybody understands on the commissions moving forward what the expectations are for rounds, as well as, you know, what the expectations are for fees. So we're committed to the 7-year plan right now, but like I said, I can't make any promises for future commissions.
Can I just follow up real quick? I mean, I'm sure you're aware, if you've ever been to a Parks and Rec meeting, or you've been involved in raising rates for the golf course before, right? It is really, really hard to do, and you get people out sometimes, a lot of people out protesting it, but I think it's important that people understand this doesn't work. This renovation, your plan doesn't work unless we do the $8 over the 10 years. I mean, we end up losing money if we don't. If it's $7, we break even. If it's, you know, if it's $6, we lose money. So
I understand, and I think everyone understands that. And like Mr. Curley pointed out, I mean, he obviously pointed out all of the surpluses that the golf course has made over the last 15 years. I mean, I think the golf commission that I've been a part of, as well as every golf commission that was prior, has always been very careful to make sure that the rates are market competitive with what's going on in the marketplace. That's how we set our rates currently. We look at what other public courses in the area are charging for both their resident and non-resident rounds, and we try to stay competitive with that because, you know, we don't want to lose all of our non-resident rounds because we're charging $60 and everybody else is charging $55. So we want to make sure that our non-resident rates are, that's the key, are the most competitive with the courses, and that's how we've always set it. And I'm assuming that will continue as we move forward. So maybe, so on top of the 7-year plan, they'll still be evaluating that year to year. So if, you know, economics change, then things could change, I would assume.
thanks a lot.
No problem.
Representative Bertram, I want to go back to you because you had some Golf Commission related questions,
Well,
and I saw your hand up.
I do, and I do want to say to Mr. Curley, I do appreciate the building commissions, what you all have done and the work you've put into it. I do not want to see the golf course be on the next blight discussion. Okay? But to that end, and this is probably to Ryan, Because what I do not get, and like others in the field here, I do work with looking at strategic plans and assumptions and pro formas on a regular basis. What I do not appreciate or understand is the lack of assumptions as it relates to seasons pass holders. Because with no cap on season pass holders and no cap on how many rounds a season pass holder can play, and when those people are currently paying $18 a round, not 26 or 31 depending on the day, your assumptions are wildly, they have significant wild sort of fluidity, disparity. I don't appreciate how you can actually stand there with conviction saying, like, I stand behind these assumptions when there's no cap on seasons rounds. And season passes.
Yeah. I understand that the validity of a pro forma is as good as the assumptions that go into it. So I hear you loud and clear. The pro formas that were built from the ground up to the smallest level of ingredients or inputs, so that we looked at the trend of the last 5 years of rounds played in every category, including season pass holders, and we worked on trends and started with a benchmark and a starting point. What we didn't do is assume any difference in behavior with respect to season passes that would influence the decision between these two pro formas. So the assumptions carry over. There's no incremental change that's affecting the bottom line on one and not the other.
So I can see why you did that.
Yeah.
So maybe it's more the question for Ryan, because if you have a beautiful course, what I did not see in my Google search looking at other public courses in Connecticut, I did see differentials between playing during the week and early morning versus twilight times. I didn't see other season pass holders for public courses. And so that goes back to my concern is, why are the taxpayers of Fairfield being asked to subsidize a quasi-private course? That is my fundamental concern with respect to this clubhouse, which is less about the building commission and more about the golf commission.
Sure. Representative, you should come to one of my meetings, Representative Bertram, because I have a different view than a lot of people do on my commission about the season pass. But the season pass, we've looked at the break-even point multiple times. We've actually raised the price this year to raise the break-even point to how many rounds you play to break even on the season pass. I believe, my understanding from the prior Parks and Rec director, Mr. Lombardo, was that that there was a lot of benefit to the town in receiving the money up front, rather than throughout the course of the season, and also the benefit, for the residents of the town. Now, obviously, season pass is only open to residents. You can't get the $18 rate that you're referring to if you're a non-resident. You can only get it if you're a resident. There is a non-resident season pass that you can purchase that will allow you to play at the resident rate. If you've ever been to one of the meetings, I pushed hard to eliminate the season pass this year, but was not successful. And if you want to talk about people coming out and protesting rates and rounds, that didn't go over well with a lot of people this year. But I do know that it's something that the Golf Commission will continue to look at moving forward. I don't anticipate people taking advantage more of the season pass based on the clubhouse. The people that buy them are the same people that buy them, kind of throughout. We were very consistent in our numbers on how many we sell. So it's typically the same group of people that are buying them. So I would anticipate Craig's projections. They're going to carry over. I would be shocked if they didn't, based on my experience with it anyways.
And one point that I think is important to note, and again, it doesn't affect the financial results of this project, but in terms of the season passes, they are priced in a way that in order for someone to make that pay for itself, in other words, the discount you have to play enough rounds for that discount to offset the upfront cost, and the break even is roughly somewhere between 25 and 33 rounds, depending on which pass you get. There aren't that many players that play significantly more than that. There are probably a handful that retired seniors are probably exceeding that significantly. But in terms of the adult season pass, I'd be shocked if it was significantly above the break-even point.
I mean, if you're ever interested, you can always email me. I'm happy to tell you all the research that Anthony Calabrese, who's not here tonight, and I did on some different options. We looked at a punch card where you could buy a certain amount of rounds up front and get a discount, and we actually determined that financially that wasn't a better situation for the town. We did change the senior pass. We changed it from a 7-day to a 4-day. That was one of the reasons why we did that. That was my first year on the commission, so I do think the Golf Commission is, at least some of us are sensitive to that, and, we're going to keep looking at it, but it is a vote that has to be taken, and there is always going to be a lot of pressure from the golfing community on that point, for sure. But it is something we're looking into.
Further questions or comments? Representative Herron.
Hi, Doreen Herron, District 9. I just had a question for the increase in rounds, the projection. Is it, I heard 20 tournaments, an increase in 20 tournaments a year. Is that true?
Eventually, if you look to page 17 of your packet, you'll see that we start out by assuming 3 tournaments in the first year. And then we go in the next year to up by an additional 5, and then to 12, then 15, then 17, then 18, then 19. So it takes until 2027 before we get to 20.
And I guess I feel like that's aggressive. And I know that, like, with Mr. DeWitt at the Board of Finance, that was a concern of his. And then you had mentioned that you feel that you're pretty conservative in your assumptions. Is that true?
Well, I think this represents a realistic case. I think when we were here the last time and we put forward the pessimistic, optimistic, and realistic cases, we showed that the events at the different levels. I think it was 8 and 16. I think maybe it was 5 and 8 and 16 or something. I don't have that packet with me. But I think a slow ramp up is reasonable, and knowing that our neighboring courses, Trumbull's doing 20 events already. As I mentioned, Sterling Farms is over 25. Ailing Memorial in New Haven is over 30. You got to remember, there are in the golf season there are probably between 35 or roughly 35 days that could host an event, even if you're just doing it one day a year.
And would they displace in-town residents?
Yeah, that's been taken into consideration. If you go back to that original packet, what we showed was there may be $8,000 of event revenue, but it's offset by $3,000 or $4,000 of displaced rounds. So it's really a net benefit of $4,000 or $5,000. So we took that into.
I guess if I'm understanding it correctly, I'm just concerned that if we do ask a commitment from the golfers to increase the rates to such a degree, and that they could possibly be losing tee times over this, I think that would be a hard sell.
Well, again, most golf courses, when they host these events, they're during the week when there's not a lot of play otherwise. Mondays and Tuesdays are the typical days where outings are held. So you're not displacing the high traffic days of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. But to the extent that there is activity on a Monday, that gets moved, that either goes away or it moves to Tuesday, Wednesday, or a different day during the week.
And I guess a concern that I have is, having served on Parks and Rec, we would have to balance recreation within Fairfield. So that's a struggle that I have with projecting these revenues and understanding that we could be displacing recreation within Fairfield of residents.
Yeah, boy, that's an excellent point, but you have to realize that fundamental to the golf operations and the success of the golf operations for the benefit of all taxpayers in town is that we use non-Fairfield money as a subsidy for the golf operations. Roughly half of our revenue comes from non-residents. Roughly a third of the play comes from non-residents, but because of the disbalance in rates, a third of our play results in half of the revenue. So we have to take advantage of balancing resident and non-resident play in order to keep the rates lower for the residents. If we didn't have this non-resident play, the rates for residents would be much higher.
Further questions or comments? Representative Jacobs.
Matt Jacobs, District 3. Just a clarifying question, because we've talked a lot about the season passes. This is not a unique thing to Fairfield, right? Most public golf courses offer some sort of resident discount or season pass?
Well, pretty much every course offers a resident discount, and I think what Representative Bertram is referring to is the season pass. We have the golf, we call it the resident ID, and that's something that every single course offers. The season pass was something that every course did offer at one time. I think there might be another one left, but I'm not sure as I sit here today. But most of them have been eliminated over the years, candidly. That is one of the, but Fairfield does still maintain it. Yeah, they're different. I mean, yeah. Yep.
Representative McDermott.
Mark McDermott, District 7. I'm all confused after all this talk. Craig, you mentioned the solar analysis when you started tonight, so we'll just try to get to something else because we've been getting hammered on the number of rounds and everything else. I'm just looking at, you have here the cost savings from the cart barn, solar insufficient to justify, I guess, using the solar on the cart barn. It's a little disappointing because the main function of the cart barn is to protect the carts, A, but B is to charge the carts, correct? Because they're electric. So is it a situation where the structure just cannot hold the solar panels, or or is it not close enough to something? What's the...
Yeah, so I don't have a site plan in your packet, but if you can visualize it, a couple of things are going on, Mark. The existing cart barn sits with basically north-south orientation. What we were looking at was if we were to move it behind the third green, it would spin by 90 degrees. So you'd have the whole southern exposure on one side of the roof line. We don't have that where we currently sit. Also, where it currently sits, it's tucked right up against the Grace Richardson Preserve, so it's heavily shaded. So there's just not a solar opportunity there. But to address your point about charging the carts, I think we're okay. Thank you.
You can't see that from here, so you go ahead.
What's important to know is that the golf carts are still going to be on the same meter that the town is paying. So whether we put the solar panels on the roof of the cart barn or just on solar stanchions in the parking lot, the first piece of the solar analysis is to say, let's look at the overall expected load of the facility and let's right size the solar panels so that they cover that load, or 75 to 80 to 85% of that expected load. And there's plenty of geography in the parking lot to cover that load. So we actually really don't even need the panels on the roof. It would have been nice to put there, but it's not incrementally beneficial.
Okay, thank you. Well, some might need it to freeze the ice in the winter when the ice rink goes there, so that could help.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none? Thanks. There might be follow-up.
Yes.
If there is follow-up, please direct it to me, and I'll get it to Craig and Hal. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we have an update from the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee. And Attorney Hibson, I saw you came in. You're not on the posted agenda. We'll add you to discuss after the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee.
my last shirt.
Here, I'll move over.
Hi,
Good evening.
I'm Jill Vergara, District 7, and I'm the chair of the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee. And I'd like each of the members to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Cindy Parham, District 2. And I'm also been on the Senior Tax Relief Committee with Mark for 3 years and currently serving as secretary of the committee. I'm very passionate about what we're doing on the committee level. I work with seniors between 62 and 102 as a reverse mortgage specialist, and I do a lot of my business in the Valley, the New York area, as well as Fairfield County. And I just want to give you a couple of scenarios of how tax relief has helped a couple of my clients recently. I have a client currently who's lives in the Stratfield section of Fairfield, and he's a retired teacher's assistant who retired early to take care of his ailing mother. When I met him, he had a tax lien because at the end of the month he only had about $10. Currently, he's paid that off, and if we are able to do the cap increases, he would go from a savings of $3,500 to $4,000, which would actually give him almost $100 at the end of the month. Another client who lives very close to this school, an 88 and 89-year-old couple, has found it very difficult to pay their taxes, but they do pay them. They currently have an $80,000 credit card debt because they pay their taxes by credit card for the last 10 years. They are actually at an income of $75,800, which is $700 above the current cap of income for their, which is the highest cap that we offer. Someone like them would be able to save with our new cap increases or adding the new bracket would actually save $1,900 of their $9,000 annual taxes. So those are just two scenarios in which I feel as though senior tax relief is really helping people, but literally on a daily basis I see it as a way for people in Fairfield to stay in town firsthand. So thank you.
Mark McDermott, Vice Chair, District 7. As Cindy said, this is actually our 4th year on this committee, and after 3 years, this last 3 years, we've finally come up with, I think, a plan that is both good for our seniors, to help keep some of our seniors in town and not have them move off to somewhere else where there are maybe lower taxes, or probably they're moving for more sunshine, or maybe they move to be with their family and take care of, say, their grandchildren. But especially some of the things we looked at, specifically the QTAV that is currently sitting at $650,000. Most people, or people that have been smart over the years, are really saving a lot of money because they don't know how they're going to live. And if they retire at 65 and they have $1 million in their, say, 401k or whatever they have, and they're only making $30,000 a year, well, that $30,000 a year doesn't go too far when they have to pay taxes. It also doesn't go too far when they have the other bills, garbage pickup, maybe they have a cable bill, I'm sure, if they want to watch a little TV, but many other things. Maybe they want to buy a cup of coffee. So they're not looking to pull out all this money every year out of their $1 million because they may live for another 25 years. So I think that was really one of the most important things I think that we've come up with in this last go-round, and I hope you all will support this. I know that I personally have my parents had moved in with us here in Fairfield back in April of last year. Unfortunately, my father passed away in August, but we still have my mother here, but she's lost half her income. If she were in this situation, she would definitely need some tax relief if she was on her own. Thank you.
Hi, Peter Tolman, District 8. I'm the newbie of the group, and boy, has this been fun. I'm into it. I grew up here. I know a lot of old people, probably because I'm becoming one of them. A lot of them are struggling. It's not easy. It's a fixed income, and everything's getting more expensive, let's face it, and we haven't heard this year's budget yet. So my heart goes out to them. I keep hearing on both sides, every politician, we got to help our seniors, got to help our seniors. Well, we're going to walk the walk, talk the talk, walk the walk, however you want to say it, but now's the time. So we'd appreciate your support.
And I also wanted to say, just for background on myself and why I got involved. When I first got onto the RTM, I remember Eric Newman had asked me to join the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee. And I said yes because I thought that it would be a good way for me to donate my husband's services, who is an esteemed tax attorney. And I thought that he was going to help, kind of in a pro bono way, craft policy. And that's what I was excited to do. I came on very much believing in a needs-based approach. And I was open-minded. And I met some great people on the committee that first time around. And Carol Way was the one who had persuaded me, as well as some of the senior groups around town, like Fairfield Senior Advocates, that there was another way to look at senior tax relief, and that was incentive-based. And that was what can justify some of the expenditure on seniors is the fact that when a senior leaves, there's a 70% likelihood that a family will move in, and that will cost the town more. So there's a reason to try to incentivize more of our seniors to stay in town. And it was an evolution for me, believing in both sides, and I think that our relief program balances these two approaches very well. It can do better, as I've said in many of my papers, but I think that the way that Fairfield approaches it as needs-based, as well as opening it up to seniors with a little bit higher incomes, is a very good approach, and it should be expanded. So to begin the discussion, I wanted to talk about the QTAV, which is the qualifying total asset value. Right now, as Mark said, it's set at $650,000, which excludes the primary residence. So why are we proposing to eliminate the QTAV? The first reason, and the most important reason, is administratively based. The tax assessor, this was one of his most important recommendations in August 2017, because the QTAV is overly complex. It's difficult to determine all these applicants' assets, which means that it's not going to be fairly administered. People can abuse the system. It's impossible to audit, and it's impossible for the tax assessor's office to fairly examine every applicant's asset level. He also concluded that QTAV had no limiting effect on the program, as only 4 people were disallowed for excess assets, and that's out of 1343. That's 0.3%. So it didn't seem to have any sort of limiting effect, and we thought that that was very important. It was becoming a very burdensome and challenging test for the administrator, and it wasn't doing anything to help with any sort of limit on the program. 3 other prior tax relief committees have flagged QTAV and the problems with defining assets and applying the test equitably. So many other committees have noted this as a problem, and we wanted to address it finally. The majority of other towns in Connecticut also do not use this kind of asset test, and it's not a normal type of thing to do in in tax law in general. The U.S. is not accustomed to defining people's wealth levels in this way. It's usually income-based. There are also concerns related to inequities in applying the asset test that would require auditing, which we're not in a position to do. The assessor's office also performs many other duties for the town, and it's not in a position to investigate and verify all of these applicants' asset levels. So we are proposing to eliminate the QTAV and replace it with an assessment limit. The assessment limit is based on the value of an applicant's home. It would be simple to administer, which makes it more efficient, more transparent, which will also make it easier to apply for the seniors. Our proposal is for a $750,000 assessment limit. This translates to a $1,071,428 appraised value, and it would mean grandfathering 17 current participants. There are 5 other towns which use assessment limits: Darien, Greenwich, New Canaan, Newtown, and Weston. So the assessment limit that we set was $750,000. This compares to Darien's at $800,000, which was set in 2010. Greenwich's, which is current, at $1,328,000. And these are all assessed values. They're not appraised values. New Canaan at $1,618,344. Newtown at $461,340. And Weston at $1 million. So again, I want to say that we were not intending this assessment limit to be a limiting factor. We saw that many people, many current participants, even those in the lower income levels, could have higher assessed value homes. And we wanted to continue to enable people to participate, even those with higher assessed valued homes. These are not millionaires. Although they may own $1 million home, they're not millionaires by any means. Their income limits them greatly. So we use the current assessment values as our guide for setting our limit, and the assessor drew up a list of all of the current properties in the programs, and we wanted to make sure that we wouldn't have to grandfather too many people, because to us that meant that we were changing the program significantly in a way that wasn't good policy, because we do want many of these people who have higher valued homes to continue to participate. And we also use the other towns' limits as guides. So Newtown's median home value, which is $402,000, is nearly half of Fairfield's median value, which is $590,000. And Fairfield's median value home, which is $590,000, is half of Greenwich's, which is $1,206,000. So we tried to really go in between those two values. The second proposal was to eliminate the freeze program. The reason why we were proposing this is because the tax assessor recommended it in August 2017. And this email is included in your packet. It's one of the last documents. And it really was the guiding document for us. And also for freeze, there have been 0 participants in this program this fiscal year and last fiscal year. So it made sense to us to eliminate it. So the next proposal relates to the credit program and income limits. The credit program is the most popular program with 85% participation in the program. The current limit is $75,100. But there has been significant attrition from the program since 2015. And I'd like everyone to take a look at this historic comparison and the net change chart. I think it's on page 2, because I think it really shows the amount of decline in the program over the past 10 years. And this was significant for us, and this is what really guided us in wanting to make sure that we opened it up more and allowed the program to get back to levels where it was 10 years ago. In this past fiscal year, we had the lowest participation in 10 years, and there has been a 17% decline in participation since 2015. The addition of this new bracket, $75,100 to $90,000, would return the program to the levels of participation that existed in 2008 through 2016. But many of those years actually exceeded the participation that we're looking to accomplish with these changes. Much of this attrition was due to people being kicked out of the program due to excess income. This is another reason why we decided to raise the income limit. 51 seniors who were participants in 2017 were kicked out of the program in 2018 because they exceeded the income limit. 3 seniors who were new applicants in 2018 were barred from the program because they exceeded the income limit. This correlates to economic data showing that more seniors are retiring later in life due to economic necessity, not out of choice. People aren't opting out of the program. They're being kicked out of the program. More seniors are struggling under higher medical costs and other higher costs of living, and the minimum distribution at 70 and a half pushes many out of the program when these seniors have no ability to reject that distribution. And we think that this is the reason why many of the seniors were kicked out of the program this past year. We're not the only committee to identify this as a significant problem. Past tax relief committees have identified this drop in participation as a problem that this body needs to correct. Last session, the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee proposed to raise the income level by $6,500 in September 2017. The income limit would have moved to $78,000, and with the COLA increase that's set for this year, it would have been about $80,000 for this coming fiscal year, 2020. But it failed in LNA due to a failure to provide cost analysis, which is a shame because if this limit existed, a significant amount of seniors would be able to participate more than are now. And it's just such a shame that this didn't happen in 2017, and it would be just awful if it didn't happen now. I also wanted to note that when you look at the comparisons to the other towns and even to Connecticut in general, and the tax relief that's offered through the state, you'll see that the median income compared to the amount of relief offered indicates that we're below what we should be offering in town. And that chart is on page 3. I also wanted to note that New York State offers a STAR program, an enhanced STAR program, and this is something one of the members of FSA raised to me. And it's important to remember that we are competing with other states, other towns, with the sorts of relief that they're providing. I've heard a lot of discourse about taxes and having to be competitive with the taxes that we have. I think that the corollary is also relief. And so if someone's talking about tax and tax causing exit, I think it's a necessary corollary to say that relief will help with retention of seniors. So it's important to remember that a state like New York is offering this sort of relief to all of their seniors at an income level at $86,300. Another reason why we wanted to raise the income level to $90,000 is that when we looked at that list of those disallowed for excess income, the average income of those disallowed was $97,000. So it made sense to us to raise it to $90,000. And we didn't just propose to raise the income levels, we proposed to change the tax credit percentages and the caps. We did this because we wanted to ensure that we were giving everyone more benefits. One of the problems that we saw with the program was that while the income limit was subject to COLA increases and was going up a little bit, not enough, the benefits were stagnant. So the changes to the percent credits and the caps were a way to fix that. As you can see on the summary chart of the average benefits, our proposals would result in significant increased benefits for all income levels. What I'm most proud of is that the number of 25%, the number of participants who are at a 25% minimum would increase significantly. And what this means is that people are limited to relief by being capped at having to spend at least 25% of, having to pay for at least 25% of their taxes. And this creates a formula with the local relief given and the state relief given. And so the many in the lower income levels reaches cap easier. And we wanted to make sure that we were helping more people reach this cap in the lower income brackets. And I think we successfully did that. We nearly doubled the number of people who are maxed out of their benefits. It was by 87% that we increased benefits for those lower two income brackets. One of the criticisms that I read about in Fairfield taxpayer concerned me, and I looked back at the numbers, and this chart shows that the bottom two brackets, for our proposed average benefits, they match each other. For the level 18,100 to 25,700, the average benefit would be 4,000. And the 0 to 18,000, the average benefit would be 4,000. And again, this has a lot to do with that 25% minimum formula. But I don't think that that should exist in that way. And I do think that a good and reasonable change would be to put no cap on the 0 to 18,000 bracket, and that would raise their benefits to $4,400. And I've checked with the tax assessor, who has verified that that additional cost would be $62,000. I wanted to make a note about the Fairfield taxpayer criticisms, though, that I really sincerely, I'm grateful for public discourse and getting new ideas. And talking to people, I think it's very important to be able to talk and get to the best point with policy and legislation. I never came to the table with a particular, my mind wasn't set on how to approach these changes. I wish that everyone had sat at the table with me, though, when we were making these changes and in a position to really craft this. It would have been constructive and helpful, and I think that we would have all listened. At this point, it's obstructive and it's not helpful, and I think that there was a better way to approach it rather than at the 11th hour. I wanted to make a note that I looked into some of the claims, and the 25% formula is a problem for their projections as well, and a lot of their numbers don't hold true. So, again, if we had worked together, I think that it would have been a lot more productive. So for the justification for these revisions, we found many deficiencies, which I've outlined: the administrative burdens, the complexity, the potential for abuse, the participation declines, which really stands out to us, that 300 less seniors are receiving help from the town today than they were in 2011. That's just not acceptable to me. I think we also thought that the failure of relief to keep in line with the cost of living was also a deficiency. And we're concerned about how the SALT changes will affect people this year. It's going to hit them this year, and it would be helpful to have a relief program to help people. We also believe that the comparative analysis with other towns supports our revisions. Reading, Ridgefield, Easton, and Wilton all extend relief programs to seniors with higher incomes than us. Newtown and Reading both spend more on senior tax relief than us. Reading and Ridgefield have much higher participation rates than us. The demographic analysis also supports these revisions. We're the only town studied in this area that has experienced a decline in the percentage of seniors since 1990. In 1990, seniors were 17% of Fairfield's population. Today, they are only 15% of the population. Every other town besides us had the opposite trend. Darien, Easton, Farmington, Glastonbury, Greenwich, New Canaan, Newtown, Reading, Ridgefield, Trumbull, Weston, Westport, and Wilton all have more seniors as a percentage of their populations today than they did 20 years ago. That really means something, and we have to do something about it. Interestingly, the two towns that spent the highest percentage of their budgets on the senior tax relief have a correspondingly higher retention rate for seniors. Newtown with 1.31% of its budget for senior tax relief, and Reading with 3.5% of its budget have both experienced the greatest growth in their senior populations. Each have nearly doubled since 2000. Reading officials viewed keeping seniors in town as a major benefit for the town as a whole, and to that end, established a new relief program for all of its seniors with no income limit. The average benefit in Reading last year was $2,500, so all Reading seniors could receive a $2,500 benefit. Reading now has the highest percentage of seniors of any town studied by the committee. Reading purposefully invested in its senior tax relief program, and it seems to have been successful. The economics of losing a senior and potentially gaining a family supports investing relief programs for seniors as well, which I already talked about. Seniors use less town services than families. Each child attending public school costs the town $17,000 to educate. When a senior leaves Fairfield, there is a 70% likelihood that a family will move in, causing educational costs to increase for the town. FSA estimates that the cost of losing a senior household to be $10,000 a year. Investment in our relief programs and our seniors is smart for the town's long-term health. It's a smart investment. Every budget, it seems that there's the same script, and I hear it and I see it every single year. The seniors write to us and say, please don't raise our taxes. We cannot afford to live here any longer, and I believe them. The other side is the parents who are saying, please don't cut the education budget. I will pay you more for you to provide good schools for our children. And I had an aha moment a few years ago and said, the answer to this dilemma is tax relief. It helps both the seniors and the families, and we don't have to be in this bind in budget season every single year. The bottom line is we need to address the declining participation in our relief programs. We have not acted on this clear need to improve our programs for far too many years. We need to act before we lose more seniors and jeopardize the town's long-term sustainability. Let's show our seniors that we care and follow through on our promises to help them. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from members of the RTM? Representative Herron.
Hi, Doreen Herron, District 9. Could you explain the rationale for the prorating if we hit the cap? Because that's a criticism that I've heard, and I just was curious the response to that.
We're going to mirror exactly what they did in 2012, 2013, which is just ensuring that the current participants will receive as much as they're receiving now. It's only a stop valve measure, and we really don't think that we're going to be hitting the cap at all. And what the difference between what we're doing with these amendments from what they were doing with the 2012 amendments is that we're just layering on top of something that is pre-existing. So we really don't have any risk of having someone get less than what they, or any kind of two-tier system, like what could have happened and did happen in 2012. With ours, the only risk is if something goes totally haywire and we exceed in a huge way all of these projections. Every single time that they've made amendments, these projections have been three times overblown. And I think that that's the case with this as well, honestly. And while we were giving into the CEO's concerns, we want to be, we're risk averse. I want to be conservative about it and listen to the CFO. I think that I think that it's an exaggerated concern with eliminating the QTAV. Like I said, it has had no limiting impact on our program so far. It literally has kicked out 4 people. So removing it is not going to impact it significantly. So then you have to look at, so what really does he think is causing this jump that could cause the program to go haywire? Well, I guess he's saying that the increase of $15,000 in the income limit will make everything haywire, and maybe the correlation between that $15,000 in income and some kind of asset level is different. But when you really scratch underneath the surface, the income level that we have now, around $75,000, would put someone in Fairfield around the 55th percentile. And the QTAV that we had was close to the 80th percentile. That's what was really happening. It was just the income limit that was keeping everyone, that was limiting people in the program. When we raise it by 15,000, we're not opening it up to the 80th percentile. That raises it to something like the 60th percentile of Fairfield seniors. So I really, really don't think that it's going to be an issue of hitting the cap.
Further questions? Representative Farnan?
Yes. So first and foremost, thank you for all the hard work you guys done. I know this is sometimes has been a thankless job. I know I drove you nuts a little bit too with some of my email questions. And everyone here is a volunteer and is putting in a lot of hard work. So thank you very much for all that. I have, I guess, 2 comments / concerns. One, I do think the Fairfield Taxpayers Association was onto something in regards to the empirical data to how we measure results, and I think it would be very helpful to kind of us, I think, to spend some additional time on that, like assuming this is going to pass, that we should really think, okay, how do we judge those, empirical data? I think it is really keeping seniors in town would probably be one of the most crucial data points, but there's likely others. And then second, and I think this goes a little bit beyond what the committee's charge was, which is, this whole idea of a more holistic approach. Obviously, I think, this is a key component to keeping seniors in town, but there's obviously things like, affordable housing, walking distance to the center, those things. And it really would be useful, and maybe it's occurring and I just am not seeing it, but it would be really useful if, to have the leadership in the conversation discussions with the First Selectman's office say, yes, the senior tax relief is one component of that. Here are the other 2 components that we're actively working on, because to spend this amount of money without kind of knowing what those other inputs are, that gives me some concern. So I guess, has there been any, I guess my question is, and I'll stop rambling on, is, has there been this conversation with the First Selectman's office about that overall strategy to keep seniors in town?
We've communicated with the First Selectman. I have about strategies for keeping seniors, although I don't think that that's the only goal of the program. I really just do see it as one of the most significant purposes is to help seniors, and that doesn't necessarily mean retention. It means helping with the taxes, like the HEART program for the state, Help Elderly Against Rising Taxes. I think that's a really good name. It's not make sure seniors stay in our town. I mean, for us, that's the economic motive behind maybe funding this, but I do think that it's just an important aspect of it is making sure that we're helping seniors. So I just want, and in terms of conversations, I do think it's important to broaden it out. And I've noticed this on the RTM just generally. Many things are disjointed, and there's so many committees, and there's so many different bodies, and we're not necessarily talking with each other. I would love to be able to talk more with the Board of Finance, for instance, and like get an overall vision of where we're going as a town in terms of building and asset management and stuff. And for this, in this realm of, for seniors and helping seniors, I do think that there would be great kind of synergies with like affordable housing and the senior center, and I'm going to the Human Services Commission tomorrow. And so I think it's a great conversation to have, but for us as a committee, it was kind of impossible to have that all included. We were given the task of just looking at this ordinance and figuring out, looking at it, seeing what we saw were problems, mostly informed by the assessor and the reports he's given to us, and just finding ways that we could maybe help make it better. And that didn't involve conversations with a lot of other people. I was hoping that more people would come to our meetings and inform it. We did have a great public forum where we got a lot of feedback from the community, and I think that people were really excited about the changes we were proposing. But at the same time, I can't say that our committee meetings were very well attended, which is a shame because it really would have contributed to the formulation of these revisions.
Brian, one other thing too, because this has come up, Board of Finance mentioned it in their meeting and a few other people. Does this program work? In other words, are we keeping seniors in this town because of this program? Are we going to keep more seniors in town by adding to this program? That was never our task. That was never our charge. That probably should have been answered a long time ago, or asked a long time ago. Excuse me. We've had this in place for decades. We've been together a few months. I'd like to think it is, but do we have any data saying, yeah, we've asked 114 people if they left because of taxes, and 113 said yes? No, we don't have that. It would probably take a little while to get. We've talked about how we could get it. You'd have to have exit interviews with people probably. Maybe we'd involve realtors. We don't even know yet, but I almost thought that was unfair to this committee, especially Jill, because I know what she's done. You can see that I've never looked at more charts in my entire life than I have in these last 8, 9, 10 months. So we saw a situation where the number of people was declining rapidly. The amount of money we're giving up was declining. So it was like, improve the program. Well, we tried to prop it up, and then we get smacked in the head because, well, is it working? Well, I don't know if it's working. I don't know if anybody can sit here and say 100%, yeah, this is keeping people in Fairfield. Personally, I think if people leave Fairfield, they're probably leaving Connecticut. That's my personal opinion, talking to realtors and some other people. But that aside, I think we've done a fairly good job. We've gotten smacked around a little bit and beaten up a little bit. And then Jill made a point. It would have been nice as we went along if we heard these, as opposed to like a couple of days before the meeting. But be that as it may, there's some good stuff in here. We do say we're here to help the seniors, not only keep them here, but attract seniors. So here's our chance to do it.
Further questions or comments? Representative Messina?
Thanks. Is it okay? I think Mark had a...
I just wanted to, I agree with what Peter said concerning, some kind of measurement system. We really don't know how to measure this unless you do, we have realtors set up to do exit interviews and entrance interviews. Why are you leaving? I mean, because I don't want to live here anymore, that could be the answer. Because your taxes are too high, maybe somebody might not want to answer that question. We know why several people are kicked out of the program. 50% of them pass away. Some of them exceed the income limit. Some of them have too high of a QTAV. But to measure this program is a difficult thing. And if somebody here has an answer to that question, we'd love to hear it. As Peter said, the only person that came to any of our meetings is Alex, who is a former member from the RTM, and Jim Walsh from the BOF, who happened to be in the building, I think. He might have just stumbled in there, I don't even know, but he came to our meeting. And then our friends in the back here. I mean, I've been on this committee for 3 years and been listening. We used to have a lot more seniors come to the meetings, and we've been listening to the reasons why people are leaving, why they want improvements in the system, why they want things like a homestead, you know. I mean, at the end of the day, maybe we just want to make them feel good. I mean, a long-term resident, been here for a long time, I mean, what do they give for the homestead? It's $1,600 for every senior, or in Ridgefield?
$1,600, and in Reading it's $2,500.
I mean, we have a pretty good program now, but we'll see. I mean, if this gets passed, we'll find out next year how much it improved things. If it does it all, or maybe it won't. We don't know that yet. Just like the forecast for the golf club fees. We don't know if we're going to make that money or not, right? So, thank you.
Representative Messina?
All right. My question was about the Fairfield taxpayer email as well. With respect to the Connecticut general statute that it cited at the end, indicating the RTM may not have the authority to pass the proposed ordinance, I was just wondering if you had a chance to look at that.
Yeah, we've been looking into this, and I think the town attorney is going to write a decision about this. And I wanted to say that I think it was really irresponsible to publish something like that. We were aware of the issue for, I don't know, a good week and a half or so, and looking into it, and publishing that has now jeopardized the current program that we now have. And they are going to have to pass a resolution, the Board of Finance is going to have to pass a resolution to approve the program that we currently have, so that people don't lose their benefits. I think there was a better way to deal with it. And ultimately, I think they've thrown everything at our proposals, everything but the kitchen sink. And with this throw, they basically threw the baby out with the bathwater. It will be successful, I'm pretty sure. I'm glad that you raised it, because I think that this whole conversation is for naught. And I think that, you know, the procedural issue, you have to go with what the state law is, and the state statute seems relatively clear about having to have a recommendation from the Board of Finance. For some reason, that dropped out of the process for decades in our town. So, you know, for that reason, we're going to have the Board of Finance pass a resolution to approve it, and, you know, go from there.
So the Board of Finance never opined on any of the pre-existing
No.
regulations?
No, not since the 1980s.
Thank you.
Representative Iacono?
Pam Iacono, District 8. I'm sorry, can you back up for a second? So we just sat here and listened to you talk for 45 minutes, and now we just found out that we can't do anything with this on Monday?
It just means that the Board of Finance has to make a recommendation, and then we'll postpone our vote.
Well, don't
We're
you think
still going to be voting on this.
Don't you think you should have opened with that?
No, I wanted to be able to support our proposals, which we had put a lot of time into, and we're still going to be considering this as a body.
Wait 1 second. First of all, I just want to say on behalf of at least the Republican caucus, and I get the sense from your caucus as well, that we are all in favor of senior tax relief. So we didn't need a lecture on what you were doing. We've all been following this, and we are all 100% on board with doing something to try and keep people here. I don't see this as a political issue at all, at all. You've got a bipartisan committee who's worked really well.
It's feeling like a political issue to me.
Well, there's nobody on this side of the aisle who's trying to shut anything down, I can tell you that much. I'm now really upset that it's 9:30 at night, and for 45 minutes, we've just now heard that, what exactly is going on?
We haven't gotten a letter from the town attorney yet. I'm just being honest with how I read the statute.
So, but you're telling us that we have to punt this whole thing on Monday? Or the statute says that it has to come from the Board of Finance. It hasn't come from the Board of
There is a recommendation. I've read the legislative history. It has to have a recommendation. That's what happened in the 1980s. And there was a committee guiding that recommendation. So there was a committee crafting the ordinance and making the revisions, and the Board of Finance would vote on it, and then the RTM would vote.
Well, I don't think this is political. And honestly, if we're going to go political, I think it got political when the CFO put a cap on it. And I have a real question about where we are with the proration and running two schemes, because it came up at the Board of Finance meeting, and I agree that I think it's unfair to allow some people in and some people out based on what year you were born. And is that even legal? I know there was a legal opinion asked about that. Did anybody answer that?
Are you talking about how it's an issue for 2012?
I'm talking about how you have it broken out with the caps the way that it is.
It wouldn't be an issue for ours the way it was for 2012. Our program is the same exact program overlaid onto the, it's not different benefits or anything like that. There's no different percent credits, different caps. So it's not an issue for ours. The two-tier problem is not a problem for ours.
So, Mr. Moderator, what exactly is going to happen on Monday?
So, so we are waiting, we can't, we've got to rely on the town attorney to tell us how we're supposed to handle the vote on Monday. It's not clear at this time, I think, whether we have to wait for the Board of Finance to take action or if we can do something subject to Board of Finance. I mean, the statute says what it says, we can all read it. It says recommended by the Board of Finance, so I think we all know that we can't unilaterally approve this, although we haven't gotten that confirmation from the town attorney. So I think that's where we are. We're waiting for that guidance from the town attorney on how we handle this on Monday. I mean, I think he left with the firefighters. I do want to follow up on something that Representative Iacono said. I think that she was making a different point, and the point was about, so is proration part of the current proposal?
We weren't including proration language.
So I think the point is that if you did include proration language, that somebody who was ineligible last year and therefore not in the program merely because they were too young for the program, not a senior, would be excluded, and the only qualifier that they wouldn't meet was their age, and that maybe that's an issue. I think that was the question.
Yes, that was. Thank you.
Which is, that's something that I hadn't considered before, but that may raise a separate issue.
Okay.
Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I guess we'll wait to see what the town attorney says. So now we have one other matter that came in over the weekend. It was not on our noticed warning, so we have to, I'll entertain a motion to add it for discussion tonight and for referral to all of our subcommittees for discussion and a vote in the same manner that we act on the other items that appear on the regular RTM agenda.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay. This requires a 2/3 majority to add this item. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, congratulations, Mr. Attorney Hibson. You didn't wait here for nothing. You can come up and present to us. And we're going to issue, just so everyone's aware, we're going to issue a supplemental warning to formally notice this for Monday, so we won't have to add it.
So I had...
Excuse me, just one second. Phil? Oh.
Representative Parham?
Should I be sitting in on this conversation since I'm married to a police officer?
So it's your decision to recuse yourself. You can
Okay.
recuse
I'll
yourself.
recuse myself for this
Okay.
discussion and the vote on Monday.
So we'll note that Representative Parham has recused herself from the discussion.
So I had prepared a memorandum and passed it out to email and through mail. I don't know if anyone didn't get one, if anyone needs a copy.
I'm all set.
Good, thank you.
Right. Good evening. I bring you the tentative agreement for a contract, successor contract for the police bargaining unit. By way of background, the police bargaining unit contract ended on June 30th, 2017, so we are about 18 months in the rears on that contract. So this contract would go from July 1, 2017, would be a 5-year deal going through June 30th, 2022. The bargaining unit is made up of the ranks of patrol officer, detective, sergeant, and lieutenant. Captains, deputy chief, and chief are not part of the bargaining unit. There are 105 budgeted positions right now with promotions. So when we did this calculation, it was about 103 positions filled. I believe we're down to 100 positions filled now that we've since promoted 3 lieutenants to captain. So that's the background. What we have is again, a 5-year deal. We had wages coming in at 2%. That's pretty consistent with every bargaining unit. In fact, every bargaining unit this is the last contract, by the way. If you didn't get a chance to read the end of the memo, all contracts are now current. There is one contract that will be expiring this coming June 30th, but for at least a short period of time, if this contract is passed, we will be current and up to date. And every contract that we did settle has 2% as wages throughout. The contract also calls for the police union to increase their pension contributions by 0.25% in 3 of the 5 years. So, as I said, the first year is passed, effective July 1, 18, which is already passed, will go up 0.25%. July 1, 19, another 0.25%, and July 1, 20, another 0.25%. That'll take them from a current contribution of 4.75% to 5.5% by the time the contract is over. The cost share for healthcare is going to be rising from 13% is the current. Obviously, they did not get a cost share increase for last year. It's going to 14% for 18-19, 15, 16, and 17%. So every year here on out gets a 1% cost share increase. One of the things that you've asked generally is the step movement. So on my memorandum, this contract has 5 steps. There are 3 officers that are at step 1, 6 at step 2, 5 at step 3, 8 at step 4, and 78 at step 5 currently. So most of the movement has been done. You will see, as I said, 3 more people coming on, hopefully in the next few months. They'll come in at step 1. So those will also be included into the step movement for the next couple of years. From a comparable note, I did not include, for a couple of reasons, what we used for a comparison to determine whether we were doing a good job or not on the contract. But I will tell you that there is no bargaining, no city or town in our comparable, or quite frankly, that I've seen out there that has a lower wage increase over the period of time and as good of a financial structure for the town. So with that, I'll open up to questions.
Questions or comments from our members? Representative Durrell.
There we go. All right, yes, thank you, Alex Durrell, RTM3. Thank you for the news that there really are no more, as I quoted, clawback contracts that we had talked about. I had also brought up the insurance last time, and I think it was $25,000. This has an average insurance of $26,475. Last time I asked it, and I'll ask the same thing, I don't think you answered it. Is this the new normal? I'm not saying police officers don't deserve that, public employees don't deserve it. Is it normal now that, and I know they're increasing their contributions from 13% to 17%. Obviously, that's a lot. But that's still costing the town $26,500 per employee for insurance for this contract. Is that the new normal? A year ago, I asked about 25,000, and you didn't really answer the question. Now this is 26.5.
I guess the best way to answer that is the range. I don't know the new normal. I can tell you what the range is. CCM has started doing, there's also a study on this, and it ranges from 22 to about 32,000. So I would tell you we're pretty square in the middle for our plan. We have for the most part, if you're talking town-wide, most part are in the POS plan, point of service plan. We do have one bargaining unit in the high deductible health plan, but for the most part, we are in a POS plan, which does have higher cost share amounts than what's out there for the state when you talk about hospital visits, doctor visits. Obviously, when you go for your annual physical, those are free under the Affordable Care Act. But our costs have increased to, $300 for our hospital, $30 for specialists. So our plan is not considered a rich plan for a POS plan, which puts us, as I said, kind of in the middle. So there are some plans that are cheaper than ours, some plans that are more expensive for towns that are over 60,000. So CRMA does break it, or CCM does break it up by towns or by town size. And for a 60,000 or more, we're on the lower side for healthcare cost shares.
So I didn't do the one for the salary. It looks like it's about, we'll say, $74,000 per employee. So basically, we're spending another 33% on their health insurance in addition to their salary. I mean, I'm not saying good, bad, I'm just pointing out the facts. That seems like a...
Yeah, typically, so I wasn't thinking about healthcare alone. Typically, the wrap rate, which I call it, is about 40% when you talk about a benefit rate between your life insurance, health insurance, pension, or whatever. 40% is a pretty good number to use for a wrap rate.
Good number as in a normal number, not...
Good number as in a normal number, and if you're trying to estimate cost, typically you'll look at a 40% wrap rate.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Vergara?
Hi, Jill Vergara. Is there a reason why this union isn't moving to Connecticut Partnership 2.0?
Again, we tried to negotiate that. That was not something I was able to get with. So, I mean, I can't unilaterally move them.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we'll disband the joint committee, and we will break up into our subcommittees, so please find your chair.